Welcome to Behind the Competitor. Our first interview here will be with Mr. Alex Lane, good buddy of mine. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Mr. having me.
Yes. So we're going to get into it. We're going to talk about a lot of different topics. We're going to profile and talk about who is Alex Lane and what actually makes him tick. How did he get into this? Everything. We're going to talk about all the different things. We're going to talk about sports politics. We're going to talk about all that stuff. We're going to get his thoughts about a lot of different things. So let's start off with the basics.
All right.
When did you start in martial arts?
I started martial arts back in 1992. My original instructors were Mr. Tom Somerville and Ben Cohen, and then sooner or later I met Mr. Jason Muma from All American Kempo out in Orlando, Florida.
So what made you get into it? Was it a karate movie that you saw, or is it
We actually went to a kickboxing event, and it was...
Now hold on, before you
Sure.
go into it, what was the kickboxing event like? When you went, how old were you?
I was 6 years old.
6 years
Yeah.
old, so now you're seeing people getting punched and kicked, and you're just like, I want to do this.
Absolutely. It was funny because I actually, my parents, they pulled me aside. They said, hey, do you want to try this out sometime? And I told them yes, just jokingly, thinking that they would just go in one ear and out the other. And sure enough, a week later, I'm in class.
Okay.
And what was different was I guess they used the kickboxing analogy, and then they figured that getting me into martial arts was a little bit more fitting at my age.
Yeah, for a 6 year old, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was the school like when you went there? Was it more just really traditional? Was it more sport karate based? What was it?
It was a mixture of both. Our school is primarily, American Kempo, self-defense. There's, various self-defense technique criteria, as well as a lot of forms, and a lot of different things that you do as an American Kempo, reactions of what the body does. And, growing up, it was all traditional there, and then the playtime to kick in was sparring. And I remember my very first tournament I went to was here in Orlando, and I just had fun with it from start to finish.
What was the tournament?
It was the Orlando Challenge by Mr. Calvin Thomas, who's also a very well-known martial artist in the Orlando area.
Yeah, full circle and everything like that. Yeah, right.
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
yeah. So it was his tournament that basically. Did it give you the bug right then, or was it more so like, oh yeah, it's cool? But
Well, at first, because I thought that when I went to the tournament, I thought originally I was going to have to do forms. We never did weapons at our school in the beginning. So whenever I see everyone doing forms, I looked at my parents and I asked them, I was like, do I have to do that? And then they're like, no, you can just spar. It's okay.
So you didn't want to do forms?
No, sir. I jumped directly to sparring as long as I could possibly do it. And once I got into it, it was one of those things that it kept me busy, and it kept me busy, and I continued to find more and more tournaments to go to and compete. And of course, over the course of time, growing up, you start making some friends that are local, and then when you get to the big tournaments, you even start to slowly make friends, to the bigger tournaments.
Yeah. Okay. So, did you win the first tournament?
I did not. I ended up losing the second round. I don't remember the kid's name, but I was an orange belt at the time.
But that's what happens. A lot of times
Yeah.
people end up losing, and you get that like, I don't want to lose again, and you start training harder than the
Yeah.
person who beat you, and you beat that person.
Well, the one thing I can remember about that is the very next tournament, the very following tournament I went to, which was 3 weeks later, I fought as bad as I could fight, and I ended up winning, taking first place that very next tournament. So as soon as I hit first place at that second tournament, I told myself, okay, you know what? I can do this. I can keep going. And of course, I had my family pushing to help me too.
Good. All right, girls. One of my next questions. Okay, who was your first national adult grand champion?
My first national adult grand champion. I would have to say that would be the U.S. Capitol Classics with Mr. Dennis Brown in Washington, D.C.
What year was that?
2004.
2004. Nice. Okay, so you won the Caps.
Mm-hmm.
You won the Diamonds.
Yes, sir.
You won the U.S. Open.
Yes, sir.
You won Waco.
Yes, sir.
Compete?
Compete I did as well. Yes, sir.
Bluegrass.
Bluegrass I have won. It was actually the very last year that they had the Bluegrass Nationals, and it was myself and Mr. Damon Gilbert, and we, at the time teammates. We decided, you know what, this is the last big Bluegrass. We're probably never going to see this tournament again. Let's fight our best, and we both fought, and I ended up coming up on top.
So you won. Okay, have you won the AKs?
AKAs, yes, sir, I have.
Okay, so let me get this straight. You got AKAs, you got Bluegrass, you have Waco,
Yes, sir.
you have Super Grands.
Technically, Super Grands, I fought team fights. I didn't
Okay,
fight
so you did
individual.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I got called in coming out to do Super Grands 3 times. 2, thankfully, by Mr. Joe Greenhall, went out and helped to support him, and then Mr. Mike Babier out of the Bay Area's Best. He called me, myself, as well as Mr. Preston Clemens to come team fight with him at Super Grands in Myrtle Beach.
So your list of accomplishments in this sport is probably almost all time, basically, because you've won just about every of the major events.
I've won a lot of the major events. I could say my biggest accomplishment was probably overall of my best time frame was probably 2005 when I won the overall grands at the U.S. Open, the ISKA World Championships, and that same year I won the Waco World Championships. There's not a lot of Americans that can say they won that in one consecutive year.
Yeah.
And at the time, being 19, I was hungry.
Yeah, hey, a lot. So let me get to that. Let me ask you this: do you think you're overlooked?
Absolutely not.
So-
No. I mean, I look at myself as being an original competitor. As far as being overlooked, absolutely not. You've got tons of great fighters out there. I mean, that are way either further ahead now, or they've accomplished their accomplishments, and their accomplishments always motivated me growing up to get better. Such as you've got Preston Clemens, you got Raymond Daniels, Jason Borelli, Trevor Nash, Mr. Jody Tension. I've got, nothing but respect for all those guys. Those are the guys that help try to get me to be where I am. Most importantly, of all the guys I've ever looked up to is Mr. Kevin Thompson, my teammate. And, for him, I remember the U.S. Open, it was one of those things that we had to pair up against each other twice. Right. And, we fought through the division and together, and it was almost like he was trying to pass the torch, and I tried taking the torch and going to a new, different level with the team.
Nice.
So.
All right. Oh, you mentioned one person, Preston Clemens.
Yes, sir.
What is your relationship for people who don't know?
Well, for starters, he's not my brother. Okay. Secondly, I met Preston back when I was 15. He came out to do a seminar, and at the time he had pulled his hamstring, and we did the seminar, and he pulled me aside and he goes, "Hey, I need you to start coming to these different places and dojos to train if your instructor allows you." And I got my instructor's approval to go, and I started working out with him and training with him. And it was one of those things that year he was in a phase to where he was trying to rebuild his reputation because back in the time, it was around 98, 99, Preston Clemens was dominating in Florida.
Yes.
And
not just Florida.
Oh, I'm just saying.
I remember him at Waco.
Yeah.
He was with 99.
Yeah, when he
ran through people.
So we kind of, met with each other and just said, all right, I'm going to do what I can to bring you back to life, and you can help me build me. And then we just became nothing but close friends from there, and if, stay mutual. We still talk a lot now. He's doing very well and married man and living his dream.
I remember there was a rumor that Preston had a country album.
Yes, sir.
Did you ever think about doing something like that?
Absolutely not.
You'll come in with the cowboy. Boots on.
I'm a country guy, but at the same sense, I would never consider going into the full career aspect of trying to sing.
Right. Wait, you said full career aspect. Now, would you?
No.
Karaoke?
No. I can do karaoke, definitely, no problem. But you want to get me into doing, making an album? I'm sorry, no. That was all him, and he went pretty far for a little bit for the first year and a half. He actually got a company, 2 different companies here locally on the tourism on iDrive in Orlando to do songs for their theme parks. And he actually did very well with it, and was pretty successful.
You still listen to the album?
Oh, no, sir. No, sir. But every now and then I'll bring up a post as a Throwback Thursday moment, and I'll have it actually on Facebook sent out to him, and all of his friends hear about it, and they're just like, "Really?
Really? You did a country album? That's
yeah.
Nice. Yeah. All right. Okay. So So when did you join JPM?
I was asked to be a part of JPM back in 2004, right before the Diamond Nationals, and also they were trying to get me to come to the Battle of Atlanta. The only problem was that I had had prior commitments to being on the IAKSA team, which was under Calvin Thomas and Mr. Mike Smith. And I was already pre-committed to go to Switzerland. And at that time, WKA and IASCA actually merged. So it was a kind of a bigger tournament than it had normally been. So we went there, I fought, and ended up pulling off a gold medal out of that.
Wait, time out.
Yeah.
So you have a WKA medal as well, too?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we're just going to keep adding to the list of accomplishments to Alex Lane here.
Well, I mean, it's been a fun, time. I can say that, I would love to carry, other information up to the next generation.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the things that I've been, trying to work on outside of competing now. I've been working with a group of people out in Austin, Texas area, trying to get their sport martial arts level up to a different level than they've ever seen before.
So you're going to be in Austin?
Been training and teaching over there.
Austin,
I'm looking to potentially relocate.
Okay. All right. Texas, well, I know they would love to have you down there. Okay.
Thank you.
So you came in 04
Mm-hmm.
with JPM. So was that before or during the exodus with Raymond and Jotty?
That was just after, because what happened when Raymond, the whole, it was Raymond, Mike Pombero, Reggie Perry. That was the, back then that was the elite JPM. I could sit there and say that there's been a lot of JPM teams back in in our era, and that was the elite team. Mm-hmm. I will always look up to that team. Even as a current, as well as a veteran JPM member now. I could say that year, it was a tough year for them. They wanted to look into a rebuild year, and they first grabbed Elias Lemon, and and Elias had shown various amounts of improvement and wanting to be a much more developed competitor, not just as a team aspect but individually. And then once he got into the realm, I remember Jesse Goldberg got picked up as well. Actually, Jesse got picked up before Elias. And then after Jesse, that was Elias. And then after Elias, they still didn't have the key products just finished yet. And Preston was still competing, but Preston was starting to show a little bit of a downslope, but he was still active. And then I remember I fought at DC, and it was just me, and everything was clicking that entire weekend for me. I didn't have a team to fight with. It was just myself, and fought one division, and then pulled off a grand and ended up...
And so then right after that, they kind of contacted you and said, hey, we were thinking about wanting to put you on, but you were already committed. And
well, I'd spoken to Coach because Rodriguez before, and telling him, I said, I'm only looking at one direction, and that's black and white. And I didn't have any other, I had other people and other teams that I fought with during that time frame before that were fun and that we clicked together. But ultimately, that was my goal, was fighting alongside with my teammate Preston, and also representing the colors that I grew up watching from 6 years old.
So with that, so since you came in right after that exodus, that means you guys were the rebuilding year at that point, but you were still winning. So it wasn't like you just came in and you came in and you were on fire, because 05 you won US Open, you won WACO, and you were winning. So right after that, but then there was this kind of cloud around the aura of JPM as people were talking, I'm not gonna say bad about it, but it was more not in the most...
Well, I mean, I could say that, like going back to what I said before, when you had Mike Pombero, Jotty Tension, Raymond Daniels, even Preston when he came back into the swing of things back in 03 and 02, that was the team that was the toughest team. I mean, in comparison to CJ. Yes, sir. Yeah, so. And I mean, their only arch nemesis, of course, was CJB, and CJB with Damon Gilbert, Trevor Nash, and Jason Borelli. You also had Ninja Fitzpatrick, who was another wild card that just came out of nowhere. Yeah. But A lot of people, yeah, there was a lot of speculation about, is this the JPM that's the next elite group?
So
No,
would that motivate you, or were you competing against when you would compete? Were you competing against that mindset or training? Were you thinking I have to prove everybody that I'm up to this level, or were you just going out there like I know what I can do? I'm not trying to prove anything. What was your mindset?
my mindset was being humble and going after just doing what I could to win. I knew for a fact that I was not trying to replace anyone's shoes. Okay, and the one thing that the team looked at for me was taking the investment of, this guy is going to be here for a long time and he's going to do great things for us and still continue to win. And that was the one thing that was a mindset that I had about being on JPM, was doing what I can to stay winning, and stay motivating, and not so much also contributing to myself specifically, but also trying to contribute to the team, because that was our motto. There was no I in the word team. We wanted to, build each other up. I remember we started doing trainings, going to, visit, everybody in different locations, before a tournament or sometimes even after a tournament. I know when Greg Betlock, Elias, we were on a team, I went out there for New Year's to train with them for a full week, and they, we wanted to just, be the team that was, we're back, but we're not here to have an attitude, we're here to win. And sometimes having that swagger attitude can be fun, but sometimes too, you don't want to do that because then you're going to see other teams that are just going to want to flake away and not come back.
Right.
For me, competition is great, but if you embarrass somebody, they don't want to come back. You want to keep having them come back. So be humble about it is what I've always been.
Biggest win of your career?
Biggest win of my career, I would say, would be the WACO World Championships. To me, WACO is the elite and closest thing to the Olympics. I remember that week, because I fought at WACO in 2003 in Paris. I got asked to fight then, and that was actually my first tournament as an adult.
No.
And I remember going there, and I ran out of gas. First time going, didn't prepare myself because I didn't know the criteria, that it was 3 rounds, and it amazed me. And I said, okay. And I told coach that very same year, I said, I'm going to come back in 2 years and change completely, and and pull a 360-degree difference. And I remember going to WACO, and that very first fight, Mr. Steve Nasty Anderson was commenting on me. He's like, you are holding back way too much in that first fight, because and I said, and he goes, you know why? I said, why is that? He goes, because you were thinking about Paris. And
so he remembered that.
He remembered me fighting at Paris and trying to blow out my fighter and just 10 points spread him versus just, fighting normal.
And just letting it come. Okay. So what was the 2005 experience? Who did you fight when you were over there? And
I want to say there was a good guy. There was Robbie McCarron from Ireland. That was one of the elite matches I remember fighting. There was a guy from Greece, I forget his name, and then there's another, which he's a well-known fighter out of Europe. And then there is also J.C. Cashman out of the UK group as well. I fought him for gold medal, and yeah, I mean he's a great fighter, and he's definitely always been consistent. That's one of the things that I've always looked at whenever coming up on him or even watching him compete. And then I would say that 2005 was probably definitely the best year overall.
That's your most memorable. Now you do realize that's 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That's a decade ago. So this is the celebration for basically your 5 year. So when you go into your house, do you have like a wall of just like your accomplishments in the sport?
I've got,
are they in a box in the basement or something?
No, definitely. I've got, a couple different frame setups of where my gold medals, lie, and I keep them there along with the posters of the tournament from that year. The U.S. Open, as well as WACO, as well as even WK and IASCA, those are pretty much my premier ones that I keep hung up and definitely showcase.
Okay, now, the match or loss that bothers you now, even if just the thought about it, just like, oh, I can't believe I lost that. What is it for you?
It's the match, I would have to say, it was in Providence, Rhode Island at the Ocean State Grand Nationals in 2000, actually it was 2005. I fought Raymond Daniels that night on stage. I also had to fight Jason Borelli that night. And I remember during the division day, like daytime eliminations, I was, I fought great. I fought teams that night before, fought horrible. And then the very next day I fought division, fought great, got to grand. Then I had to draw, I had to fight Jason Borelli first, and then the winner of that I had to fight Raymond. And I remember I had somebody, giving me a positive motivation from right before the nighttime show, and they were just looking at me saying, you know what, they think they're gonna stomp on you. And just, humiliate you. You gotta do what you gotta do to, pull something out. Mm-hmm. And I remember just pulling out the rabbit, and I beat Jason that night soundly, and, Jason Borelli, again, he's a fighter of his own.
Yeah, that's a whole nother...
And then I fought Raymond and ended up going into overtime with him. And the one exchange that we had at overtime, he caught me with the back fist. And sure enough, I sat down to myself, I'm going, okay, how can I replay that differently? And I said, you know what, you can't. It was a clean technique. If I ever had an opportunity to go back to doing something different.
That's that one moment.
Yeah.
Well, Ocean States was always before, it's earlier in the year, so that means that type of thing kind of motivates you towards the U.S. Open and WACO later on that year. So
correct.
Sometimes a setback is a setup for something greater. So maybe maybe that thing just motivated you, made you even more focused.
I agree.
Not let that inch.
Yeah, definitely.
And train a little bit harder. All right, now I'm gonna talk about Guys with Ties.
Okay.
Can you explain about what you're working on with that?
Definitely. They are a philanthropic organization that promotes charity events throughout the Central Florida community. Mm-hmm. What we do is our board of directors are young professionals, doctors, lawyers, obviously myself. We sit together and we have a list of we receive a list of downtown organizations that are in, nonprofits and they're in need of different situations. And what we do is we put together a theme party, whether it is a Halloween event, a Christmas event, or even a spring, casino event. We do various types of events, and those events we attract, group of young professionals that come in and have a good time, and they come out and they pay their ticket to come out to the theme park, the theme clubs. And those ticket donations, all the proceeds go to the charities that we select as a board.
So what charities have you guys given towards lately? Well, you probably given to a lot. But...
Oh, absolutely. We've done various charities throughout Orlando primarily. The one that I did this year, which we did a white party theme where everyone dresses up in all white. Mm-hmm. The actual charity that I did was the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention Orlando chapter. They were definitely a very, very serious organization that Guys with Ties, we've usually done fun, different organizations, but we've never done an organization that was of a serious factor. And so I talked to the board about doing something like that, and we had a great turnout. We raised over $3,500 to the charity, and we usually on our events we try to get anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000 a year, but that was actually our highest so far this year. We actually had our Halloween event this past month, and we only raised under $2,000, I believe it was, for the charity that we selected, which was Project Walk, and it was a organization that deals with people who are in wheelchairs that want to do everything they can to exercise whatever muscles they can possibly exercise and better themselves and to stay healthy.
Okay. Now, why did you pick the suicide one?
The suicide one prevention was actually. It started. I reached out to the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention back in February. They actually did a charity walk there, and I just happened to notice how devoted the actual charity was, not just for the representation, but also dealing with the people in general that are having family members, friends, obviously unexpectedly taking lives, and you just don't see things. And so
did you have anybody close to you that may have?
As a matter of fact, I did. Actually had a very close friend of mine who's a martial artist. She lived up in the Tallahassee area. Mm-hmm. Last year, I got a phone call from her best friend, and it was just unexpected. Did not know until anything at all, and she lived at the time in Boise, Idaho. And so I went over to Idaho to, last minute to pay my respects. And then right as we got to the airport, I found out how. And I was just one of those things that was shocking to me. But, unfortunately, it hits you a little bit. And that was one of the things that hit me when we were looking at the charities. And I got the charity sent in from us from AFSP. And I said, okay, let's look at this a little bit. And I went to their charity walk. And as I went to the charity walk, I then presented my case to our board of directors. And I said, guys, I know I'm doing this event. I like to potentially push this as an opportunity to go after this organization, especially having a past history experience on myself, knowing I can relate to it, as well as, maybe you guys have a friend or someone and that you may have close by that you could see happening or that would happen to.
Right.
And the board unanimously voted us to do it. And so that's what I took.
And then you raised the most money out of it. So,
yes, sir.
Yeah. Those types of things that I like to trying to turn a negative into a positive and really bring more awareness to people about different things, because you never really know what somebody's going through.
Mm-hmm.
And it's those type of things. I really like hearing stories about that and really people getting involved and trying to help other people out, as opposed we kick and punch at each other, but at the same time we're all part of the same family. And
Absolutely.
Need to help each other out a lot. So let's try to pivot a little bit to ask you some. Let's do like a more of a straight off the top. First thing that pops in your mind, Paul Mitchell.
Black and white.
All right. Roller coasters.
Crazy.
Alligators.
Amazing.
Florida Gators.
Seminoles.
2005.
What a year.
Home.
Orlando.
Okay. Karate.
Life.
Ireland.
Tough.
Preston.
Family.
Mike Smith.
Family.
Waco.
Olympics.
Okay. Now I just want you to tell me, what is your favorite phrase?
Phrase? As far as during competing?
Anything. Whatever you like to say. If somebody said, oh, Alex says that all the time.
I would say last one, best one, or we like it, we love it, we want more of it.
Now, what do you want to be remembered in this sport for?
Well, as far as being remembered, the one thing that I would like to make sure of is that the legacy of the kickers is always going to stay alive no matter what. And as far as the people that, have grown to make the sport what it is today, I hope that I can help contribute and also make the people understand that it's okay for someone to be humble in a fight versus someone that is wanting to be just taking everything as they can possibly take it without consequences. I know that, over the years, I've only had maybe 2 or 3 times I've ever had my head get really into myself as far as competing. And sometimes it takes the right person to make that click. And I don't think that if a fighter's mentality should ever have that. I think a fighter's mentality should also be, comfortable with throwing what's natural to them, and also making sure that if you ever want to compete more and more and more, you're always going to do what you can to get that person to come back and motivate. Like you said, with Raymond, Jason, that probably was a good humble experience. That, you know what, I wasn't ready yet. I was not ready to get over that speed bump, and then all of a sudden everything started clicking naturally. And
so let me ask you this. And first, let me get this out. Your top 5 fighters of all time.
Okay. Top fighters of all time. We got Raymond Daniels, number 1. Steve Nasty Anderson, number 2. this is a favoritism because obviously he's my family and friend, Preston Clements, number 3. I would say Trevor Nash, number 4. And number 5, Damon Gilbert.
All right. Now, from the span of 2000 to 2010, that span,
Mm-hmm.
if they were to rank you, where would you think you would rank?
As far as a top 10 tier?
Top 10 or top 15, wherever you think you would land and they took all the fighters of 2000 to 2010 area.
Mm-hmm.
And where do you think you would land in that era?
I would hope that I'd land in the top 10.
For
Would I rate myself number 1? Absolutely not. I know that in our sport there are other fighters that are, legitimately better overall all around. If I were to compare myself into the top 10 of that time frame, you got Brian Plemple, you got Jason Borelli, you got
it's a lot.
you got yourself.
It's
you got
this for me to see where you would put yourself.
I would say probably the top 15.
You would
potentially.
You would put yourself in the top 10.
It's tough. On that one.
I mean, let's look. You have Raymond, you have Jody, you have Trevor, you have Jason, you have Damon, you have
yourself, Greg Bentlock, Elias.
You do, but then you look at it from the standpoint of people who are. You have Brian Plemple. Because I don't think half the people have the accomplishments that you have made. So could you put yourself in the top 10? I would say that, but would you put yourself in the top 5? I don't know.
No, for me, being in the top 5 means that I would have potentially gone even further than just competing in sport martial arts. I would have considered even going towards the WCL back then during that time.
Did you ever think about doing it?
I got asked twice.
Okay.
However, it was one of those things that at that time frame when WCL started kicking around, I was still considering on just competing in NASCA. Mm-hmm. I didn't have any commitments on wanting to go even further and go beyond the sport. For me, I was doing what I wanted to have fun with. And
so the 6-year-old in you was satisfied. He didn't want to get into that kickboxing realm. That started him off into it.
I always got asked. Like I said, it was one of those things I didn't expect it, and I didn't have motivation to go for it. Mm-hmm. And I've always been the fighter to where I've never wanted to knock out somebody, but in the same sense, it is a nice feeling. But
it is.
I just I've never been the type of person to ever do that. I was a very, very competitive otherwise.
Okay. All right. Well, you got anything else you want to talk about? Your upcoming move to Texas or anything else that may have sparked on Facebook?
No, I'm actually, this year alone, I've been working a lot with an organization, not just out over in Texas, but I've also been working with a concussion protocol management program over here in Orlando. And these group of guys, we've been working and spending a lot of time together. I don't know if you guys been watching the year so far, but we've been getting a lot of knockouts this entire season.
Yeah, there was a couple here this weekend.
Yeah.
It was kind of shocking, like, whoa.
Yeah.
But, so what's the name of the organization?
It's actually called Peace of Mind Baseline Testing. Mm-hmm. And their job and role is to, help youth athletes as well as even adult athletes perform a baseline test that's a computerized system that athletes, in the professionals as well as in college sports they use. And they do the test, and if they ever encounter a potential injury, whether it's in the tournament, the dojo, or even if they fall off their bike, they go to a certified head trauma doctor and they can do a post-test and analyze the baseline test from the original baseline testing. And that baseline testing lasts up to 18 months. So they can analyze if that person has, a different level concussion, and what it gives a little bit of a better trigger on what the doctors are able to figure out as far as the rehab and treatment time. Mm-hmm. And they asked me if it would be a potential project in for sport martial arts, and I told them, I said, it would, but it's not there yet, and it's starting to slowly see it more and more and more now that more knockouts are happening in our sport.
And that's going to bring a lot more attention to that we may not want, but it's going to, a lot of regulations and stuff are probably going to end up happening. So
right, and that's one of the things that I've been working with my father, who's also a NASCAR promoter. with the NASCA organization. We're trying to work out a concussion protocol management system that we're trying to work on for the refs as well as the tournaments. Because you're looking at all these hits now, especially with people with smartphones. Waivers are starting to become more of a thing of the past, and also tournaments too are starting to get less. I want to say care on the competitors by getting their parents or students to come in and fill as medics, which can be certified, but they may not be completely certified. You go to a tournament and you don't have a certified medic on standpoint, and a lot of things could definitely happen, and that waiver is only going to be a thing of the past.
Right, and a good lawyer will get right around that, and we'll be in a lot of different troubles that we will be getting into if we start having that type of stuff going on. So, well. Thanks, Alex.
Thanks again, man, for having me. I appreciate it. It's been a long time.
Yes, it has. We'll talk about that off.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.